Hey everyone, it's Cam here, welcoming you to another episode of The Build Room. In today's episode, we are gonna plasti dip some stuff. So hang around and see how it goes. Okay guys, so for those of you that have seen the episode that I did on my daily driver, the A90 Supra, I'll pop a link to the episode about there. So in that video, the wheels and the mirror caps are red and the brakes are black. Now, none of those are the factory colors for those parts, and it's all actually Plasti Dip. Now, there's varying opinions on the internet around Plasti Dip and its uses and whether or not it is a good product or not. I think that provided you're using it for the right reasons, it can be a pretty handy thing to have. Particularly for me, what's important with the A90 is the ability to revert back to stock. I don't want to powder coat or paint the original wheels and then not be able to revert them if I ever sell the car. Similarly with the brakes, the hassle of pulling them off and then re-bleeding lines and having them sandblasted and re-powder coated a different color just to paint. So the ability to revert back to stock is great with Plasti Dip. The layer of protection that it gives the original OEM surfaces is also a big deal, so especially on the wheels and the mirror caps. I've done about 7,000 Ks on that car now, and the wheels are basically brand new underneath that Plasti Dip, similarly with the mirror caps. So you can't beat that sort of level of protection unless you start going to paint protection films and things like that, and they really do get expensive quick. The final thing I like about Plasti Dip is the relatively ease of preparation and the low cost of preparation. You're not doing, huge layers of primer and sanding or blasting or anything like that to get things up to a surface that you can Plasti Dip. It's really quite easy. So about 3 months ago, I removed all of the Plasti Dip from the wheels, the caps, and the brakes and reverted back to complete stock. The car's been sitting in that condition since, but today it's time for another change, and this time I'm gonna go black. And once I've gone black, I'm probably not gonna go back to standard ever again. Never go back. So in terms of what we're gonna need, it's actually pretty simple. So obviously we need the Plasti Dip. I have 4 cans of black Plasti Dip here. I'm not sure if we'll need that much, but I'd better to have too much than too little and have to stop in the middle of the job. And I also have some glossifier. Now glossifier is like a glossy clear coat for Plasti Dip. It won't bring it up to the shine of a standard clear coat on a paint job, but it will make it slightly more shiny and offer a little bit more protection. I'm not sure if I'm going to use this. I've got it. We'll see how the wheels look in the satin to matte finish that Plasti Dip is normally. And then if we decide that the gloss is needed, we'll throw it on. The only other things I'm going to need to really do the job is some wax and grease remover to prep the wheels, some playing cards. I'll show you what they're for in a second. And also I would highly recommend, if you're doing a job like this, get yourself one of the guns for the Plasti Dip cans. They're actually quite firm in the nozzle, and it does give you a little bit of carpal tunnel if you're spraying a lot. So yeah, it's much easier and you'll get a better job using one of these because you can control the flow a bit better and things like that. So if I had one tip for the application of Plasti Dip, it would be to ensure that you put enough on. So many of the videos that I see on the internet of people having massive fails of Plasti Dip really just stem down to the application process and not putting enough on. I don't know if that's a cost saving measure or just a lack of understanding that this isn't paint and it needs to go down a different way. But yeah, if you put enough on, you won't have that many problems. If you try to mist it on and get fine layers and keep the build down to a minimum, you're gonna have a lot of trouble trying to remove it for starters. And also it's more prone to cracking up because of UV damage and things like that. So put enough on. To drive that point home, I actually recorded the removal of the Plasti Dip from the wheels when they were red. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna jump back and watch that one, and that'll prove to you the value of putting on enough Plasti Dip. And then we'll run through the process of putting the new color onto the wheels. So let's do that now. Okay, so this is the front wheel. I painted the wheel red, center caps are stock, but I also painted the brakes black. The calipers are originally red, but red on red just didn't look right. They weren't quite the same color. I've really enjoyed having the red wheels and that for a bit of pop, but it's time for something different. I'm going to revert back to stock for a little bit, and then we'll see what other colors I might want to try. The red has been on this wheel for about 6 months now, I'd say at least. So it's been through many heat cycles. So I guess we'll pull it off now, and it should show us exactly how easy to peel Plasti Dip is. So Pop out that center cap. But yeah, the thickness of Plasti Dip is really important because it's basically what allows you to put a lot of pulling force on it without it tearing and flaking away. If it starts to flake and things like that, it's really difficult, and you just end up having to use a solvent to get it off rather than being able to peel it, and it's much quicker and cleaner if you can just peel. So what I like to do is, this is just a pick, it's not a special tool or anything, but I'm just going to try and find a piece that is out of the way. I don't want to scratch anything and damage any surfaces, but I just want to lift up a corner. So I'm probably going to start inside one of the wheel nut areas, because if I pull that too hard and scratch, it'll be covered. So as I pull it out, you can see it's very much like a latex glove or something like that. You can really put some pressure on it when you're pulling it, and that is because I've done enough layers. I think I did 3 layers of 2 or 3 layers of white, 2 or 3 layers of red. The white was to give it the extra pop and to hide, because these are different color spokes, so I didn't want them to look different colors once the red was on them. So basically, yeah, the white was sort of my primer layer, then the red, then a couple of coats of glossifier, and I actually ceramic coated these just so that the brake dust came off a little bit easier and to protect the plastic coating, and it worked really well. I was actually really quite happy with it. So yeah, you can see I'm able to start pulling on this now, and I'm just going to work it. And what you want to do is just have it pull off cleanly. So make yourself some room. Alright, so that gives me a good starting point. Alright, you can see there's no residue or anything on here. It basically just peels off absolutely perfectly. These were Plasti Dipped within at least probably, let's say, 8 weeks of owning the car. So they've been protected the entire time, and you know, it is a really good way to protect your wheels, and the added bonus of being able to change the color. It's not going to protect you from curbing the rims, but if you do curb your rims, you can you spray some more Plasti Dip on and you can sort of fill over. The only things that I'm going to suggest are, with your pulling, on areas like here, you've got a thin lip, right? So if I just pull this off, it's going to work in the majority, but you can start to break it off, and then you'll end up with little bits in here like I've got here. You see there's a little bit of red just in here. Now what you actually want to do is, when you're pulling it off, you just pull it away, right? So that's going to want to lift it off the surface more than it's going to want to drag that way and leave something behind. So that's how you want to do that. Same with the other corners and bits and pieces. So you're just pulling it off as we go. And there'll be a little bit of cleanup, but doing it this way, the cleanup's really minimal and manageable. So I'm going to peel the rest of the wheel and we'll see how we go. So we're all done. That came off really easy. And the beauty of it is, we don't have any stone chips, we don't have any corrosion or anything like that. This is basically a brand new wheel. 100% protected. So yeah, I think Plasti Dip's a bit of a win. It's not for everything, but I think that wheels are a really good use case for it. So let's have a look at the brakes now. Obviously the heat load on the brakes will be higher, so let's see how it's held up. Okay, so yeah, that didn't take long and it's pretty good. Okay, lastly, the mirror caps. Now, I took these off to Plasti Dip them, but I don't think I'll need to take them off to remove the Plasti Dip. It's just going to be a little bit of a struggle, I think, to start to get an edge, but once we get an edge, I'm hoping we can peel pretty easily. Okay, we are back to stock. Other mirror came off just as easy as the passenger side, and you know, to be honest, it's not as intense a look, but it's still a good look on the car. These rims and the black mirror caps, but yeah, you would never know. And I guess the main thing here is that those rims have been protected for 5,000 Ks now. Okay, so I hope that drives home the importance of putting on enough Plasti Dip. Please don't cheap out on it and don't be lazy, get enough coats now. So my process for painting the wheels is actually to take them off the car. You can paint them on the car. There's plenty of videos out there where people stuff a trash bag over the rotor and the caliper and they just spray away. But there's a couple of problems with that. Firstly, you're basically crouched down working around the bottom of your car all day long. It's pretty uncomfortable, which usually means you don't have a lot of patience for it, which usually means you don't spend enough time getting the job right. So I like to pull the wheels off, get them at a good working height, and then spend the right amount of time on them. It's also, sometimes it's easier to lay the tires down flat, so depending on the surface of the wheel, so you can get a pool of Plasti Dip if you need to, or a thicker build-up, not a lake, but a thicker build-up without getting any runs. So being able to flip the tires over is quite handy at sometimes. Thirdly, I like to mask up the back of the rim, and obviously that's very difficult to do if you've got it on the car at the time. So I have 4 painter stands here set up. I've already taken the wheels off the car. So let's have a look now and we'll get into preparation. Okay, so wheels and tires are off and they're on painter stands. Painter stands are really good value and hugely useful. If you are working on cars a lot and you want to get things up to a height, I'd highly recommend investing in a set of these. These were really cheap from, I think, just super cheap auto or something like that, but well worth the investment. Now, the tyres and rims themselves. So the tyres have obviously got a lot of tyre gloss. They've been on the car for a year now, so they've had a few coats to shine them up. There's road grime and things on the wheels, so we do need to make sure we clean all of the rims really, really well. And we want to get the loose dirt and things off the tyre itself so that we don't end up with any of that sand and junk in the actual Plasti Dip when we spray. Because we will be moving this around, which means we're going to agitate that dirt off and things like that. In terms of the tyre shine and things like that, on rubber, masking tape is not going to stick very well, so it's very difficult to mask these up. You don't have to mask them up. I have sprayed wheels before where I've simply just sprayed black over the whole wheel, put it on the car and gone for a drive, and what happens is as the tyre moves around, the Plasti Dip will sort of delaminate and fall off, or you can peel it off or rub it off with a microfiber cloth, but that's a lot of effort. I'll show you a really easy way to mask these up, which is a bit novel. My recommendation is just do that every time. You'll save yourself a world of pain and the tyres won't look ridiculous after the first sort of 20 Ks until that stuff, it looks like dreadlocks until it actually peels off. In terms of cleaning the rim, now rims are pretty hardy. They're obviously meant to, the modern clear coats on them and things like that are meant to be chemical resistant and stuff like that. But you do want to be careful. You don't want to use anything abrasive, especially with the shiny stuff and things like that. So what I'm going to use, which I mentioned before, was just store-bought wax and grease remover. It's really easy to use. Just spray it on, give it a little bit of soak time, wipe it off with a clean rag, and we should be good to go. So let's do that now on all 4 tyres. And then we'll get them stood up because we're going to paint them vertically, at least for the first few coats, and then we'll see if we need to lay them down throughout the process. Okay, so all 4 wheels are ready to go. In order to mask these up easily, as I said, trying to get masking tape to stick to this surface is going to be difficult. This is where the playing cards come into play. Okay, so we want to be able to get paint all the way on the edge of this rim so that it doesn't peel off easily, but we don't want to get it on the tyre. The easiest way to do that is just to take a playing card and you can wedge it in between the tyre and the rim and it'll just stay there. And now we just repeat that the entire way around the rim and we have a mask. And you can probably reuse these if you want. I wouldn't recommend reusing them as playing cards, but you might want to reuse them as masks at a later date, or when you get bored and decide to change the colour of your wheels again. Okay, so tyres are all masked up, front and back. So now we just got our Plasti Dip. Make sure you shake it up properly. I've been shaking this off camera. And then the handle, just basically, if you aim the nozzle forward, just slide it over the top, around this steel ring. Pops on, and you're good to go. Keep shaking it, won't come off, but now you can spray Plasti Dip. Okay, and so whenever we're spraying, the other thing to think about is health and safety. Got to do it. So yeah, wear a respirator. When you do buy a respirator, and seriously, when I was young, I didn't wear a respirator, I didn't wear goggles, I didn't wear gloves, I didn't wear any of that stuff. Get used to wearing it early. Trust me, bite the bullet and do it. Save your eyes, save your health, and all that sort of thing. When you are getting a respirator, make sure you get one that fits. There are different sizes, and the shape of your face will determine what gives you a good seal. Also need to make sure you have the right filters. This is a 3M double filter respirator, and it's currently running A1 organic filters. So these are organic vapor filters, because not all filters are the same. Some are just meant to filter out dust and things like that, but when you're working with, particularly with 2-pack paints and things like that, you really want to make sure you've got a good quality filtered air supply. So yeah, this is a bare minimum that I would say is reasonable for 2-pack, and you know, once you buy it once, you might as well use it for everything. Now that all that really fun stuff's out of the way, let's get into some actual painting. Now, obviously, wearing a respirator is going to make it hard to hear me, so I'm going to try to talk through this, but I may just have to do a voiceover. Apologies if I do. Okay, so I'm hoping you can still hear me. What we're going to do is a very light coat as our first coat here. We don't want to just start slapping it on because it's not going to adhere very well and it's going to have a tendency to run. So just a very light mist coat, and we want to, because we've got these blades and things like that, you've got to come in it from different angles, okay? So there's no point just spraying front on the whole time. You're just going to find that later on you've got a whole area that isn't mist. Now, to make sure we get coverage, what I said before about rotating the wheel, that's where that's going to come into play. So I'm going to twist the wheel 90 degrees after each coat, so that if I normally, because of the way that I spray, I would normally miss this spot. Once it's moved around, I'll pick it up on another coat and I won't leave that hole there. So let's just throw a light coat on all four first, and then we'll come back for something a bit more substantial. Okay, so if we look up close here, you can see that light coat. I'll get some light on it. So over the polished areas, you can really see that it's just a very fine mist over the whole thing. The idea is that's not heavy enough to run, so it's going to dry there and be an anchor point for the future coats. So we'll just give that a couple of minutes to flash off, and then we'll get on with a slightly thicker coat. Okay, so we've got cover there on the wheel. There will be a few places that I've missed, but like I said, we're not trying to boil the ocean the first coat, or the first real coat, other than the mist coat. But we just want to get a reasonable amount of product on without getting runs. We will need to come and recoat these quickly, so I'm not going to keep stopping, but each layer sort of etches into the layer under it. So what you want to make sure that you do is to keep moving to a point where, again, it's a balancing act so that you don't get runs, but it still will flatten out a bit. So I'm going to keep moving and then we'll see how we go after a couple more coats. Okay, so this is a wheel that I've just finished a coat on. Now if we look over it, that's a pretty good solid coat and it's quite shiny and wet. If you have an appearance that looks like sandpaper, you're spraying too dry. If you spray too dry, the colour will not come out. Let's see, this will come out grey rather than black because it'll diffuse the light. So yeah, you want to get it to a reasonable level of shine for a wet coat. And then if we move down to the first wheel I did, you can see that that is flattening out and turning into a very nice satin black. Okay, so get the light in the right spot. See, quite smooth, flattened out into quite a nice satin finish. And that's the point at which you sort of, you know, unless you're getting to this sort of matte finish, you're not ready for your next coat. You need to give it some time between coats. You just can't keep throwing them on top of each other, but it isn't too long. But yeah, just let it flatten out and then you'll be ready for your next one. Okay, so that's the second coat on that one. I did forget to rotate the wheel, and I'll show you why it's important to do that first now on this one. So I'll just move down. Okay, so this wheel looks pretty good the way it is. Again, nice satin finish to the whole thing at the moment. There's a few little wet corners, just things to be careful of, and that, you know, you get more confident as you go, so you start putting on thicker coats. You've got to be careful because at some point you've got to run and then your confidence will go back and you start the cycle again. But this looks pretty good. And then if I rotate it, we'll see whether I missed any spots. Okay. All right, so there is some light areas just on the top of this rim here that I've missed. On that wheel, I actually missed one of the fans completely. It was pretty much almost chrome. And this one here is also quite light. I'll see if you can see that. So this area here, you can still see the difference in the colors. So there was a black edge here and then the chrome. So you can still see that. So yeah, we haven't got enough cover there. So I'll do that first. I'll spot this area in first, and I'll also spot the back of this valve in first, and then we'll do another full coat. Okay, so it's the next day. The Plasti Dip has had plenty of time to dry. The wheels came out awesome. I'm so happy with them. Let's have a look at how they went. Okay, so overall, super happy with the job. If you can see, have a look at these arms here. The paint was thick enough to lay out really flat. It's not sort of grainy or rough anywhere, which means it has that deeper black that I was talking about, rather than being a little bit lighter if it was a really coarse finish. All right, so we have 4 black wheels now that can go back on the car. It's actually quite interesting. The limited edition Supras had these full black rims. I think they were, I don't know if they were gloss or matte, but you know, this almost looks like a factory finish. So yeah, let's see what they look like back on the vehicle. Okay, so for those of you wondering what's happening here, this is going to a car show tomorrow, and I just wanted to try out some stripes, and I figured while I'm plasti dipping, we might as well try out some Plasti Dip stripes. So yeah, I've got the black wheels on. This is a few days later. I've been driving around on these, but yeah, so I've taped all these out, and when you're doing stripes, it is possible to get a good finish on them, but you've got to do them a certain way, and that is to ensure that you never end up with a dry line of Plasti Dip where the tape is. Okay, it has to be wet when you pull the tape off, otherwise you won't get a clean line, or you'll pull the Plasti Dip up. So I've done both sides the same, and I'm doing this outside, which I should not be doing, but as you can see, Violet Crumbles is taking up all the garage and has no wheels, so it can't be moved out. So yeah, just gonna give this a crack. So what we will do here is, we've wax and grease removed it already. We're gonna put a very fine mist of Plasti Dip over it and let that flash off so that the next thick layer has got something to key into. And we're really only probably gonna do one thick coat of Plasti Dip, or perhaps two if I can do it quickly enough. And then we're gonna pull all the tape off and see what we've got, and it'll either work or it won't. And that is it. Okay, so yeah, the lines came out pretty nicely. They're pretty sharp. They're not perfect, but you know, this is a $3 pinstriping. Obviously the paint around it needs to be cleaned up a little bit. The whole car needs a wash. And yeah, from a distance it looks pretty sweet. I mean, even up close it looks pretty good, and those stripes follow the line. So if you can see the scallop on the door, goes all the way up and connects into there. Also echoes this line here. And then the haunch, it just sits a tape line width or 25 mil away from this swage line over the rear haunch. If you follow the car's lines, you're always going to get a better looking graphic, I think. Putting on random shapes just for the sake of it never really works out too well. So we'll let that dry overnight, and then in the morning I'll give it a wash, and we'll have one final look before we take it to Toyota's in the park.
Tomorrow.
Alright, so it's the next morning. You can see the stripes have come out really nice. They're fairly smooth to the touch. The lines are quite neat. The wheels are also bang on, and fronts as well are all good. Like I said, they still need a clean. Haven't had time to take it for a wash yet, but I would say the car is good for the show. But unfortunately, that's where we're going to leave you guys for today. I'm going to finish getting this thing cleaned up and then take it down to Toyota's in the park, and on next week's episode we're either going to take on those struts, or maybe we'll just do a run through of what we see today, and you guys will be able to see the complement of Perth Toyota classics and modified cars. Either way, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Build Room. Bye for now.